Well, hello and welcome to Linux Astro. And let's see what we're doing tonight. We're going to start. I've got everything set up. We're using a wide field setup tonight, the Radian Raptor. And I've already done the autofocus and the polar alignment. We're using tonight PhD 2 for the guiding. We're using Skychart for what you see in front of you here, the Skychart, the planetarium. And we're going to be using CCDCiel for the imaging and the plate solving. Plate solving will be done by ASTAP, but it'll be done through CCDCiel. If you could let me know if I'm sounding all right, that would be great, because it looks good on my end. All right, where I am right now is way over here in Leo Minor, and I went over here to do my calibration for the guiding so that everything would be all set up to go tonight. What I'm going to do first, I think, is grab the Pleiades while we can. The Pleiades is Messier 45. That's a star cluster that's very famous because the Japanese name for the Pleiades is Subaru. And when you look on the back of a Subaru, you see a likeness in chrome of the Pleiades cluster. So that sits over here, and we're over here. What we'll do is we'll click on that, and then we'll hop over to CCDCiel, and since it's connected, now all of these are actually running on a Raspberry Pi that's out on the, it's a Raspberry Pi Compute Module 4, running on the telescope on the mount. And if you take a look, I've got a video there that describes the layout and how that's connected. Meanwhile, we're going to go to M45. We'll say go and OK. And if we go back here and look, we'll see this thing is going to make its round the world tour to, it's got to cross the meridian, which is the north-south line. And so it flips over when it does that. So it can point the other way. And it's heading up here for the Pleiades. What it'll do is, most of these programs work the same. They take an image, then they plate solve it. Plate solving is a method of comparing the stars in the image with an index of stars. And there are several programs that do that. ASTAP is one of them. That's what I'm using. I've also used astrometry.net, which is a NASA-sponsored program. Oh, that looks like them right there. This is a small star cluster. This probably was part of a nebula years and years, eons ago. And the nebula's burned off all its gas and used it for star creation. And so these are all wandering along through the galaxy at this time. The interesting thing about this one, if we crank it up just a little bit, well, we'll wait to take a longer exposure. This looks like a nebula, which is a lit up section of gas. And the reason it is, there's a section of clouds and gas passing between us and this, and the light from these stars and radiation cause that to light up blue, which is kind of cool. You'll notice it made a little sideways adjustment there. What's going on is the initial slew to that section didn't go exactly perfect. And so when it took the picture, it said, I'm off a little bit. And so it slid over a little and took another picture. Now, if you see precision slew finish down here at the bottom, that means that it's happy with what it's got. So we'll turn on guiding. Turn on a picture. Pick a star and turn on guiding. And what guiding will do is keep that star in the crosshairs and tweak the mount as it's tracking through the sky to keep us exactly in that spot. And now while we're here, let's do about a 2-minute exposure. Well, we'll do a 1-minute exposure first and see what we end up with. And what we're doing is we're taking a 60-second exposure. By the way, while I was doing the polar alignment, I had no fewer than half a dozen jet trails across. I suspect that the problem is the Ukraine. We're close to a military base. We're also close to the Atlanta airport. And so we do get occasional jet trails for commercial traffic. But there's been, in the last week or two, just a whole lot of high altitude jet trails. And so you'll probably get an opportunity to see what that does to your photos. It's really not practical to take them out. We're taking a 60-second image of this, and that looks like that's finished. So we'll go ahead and crank this up a little bit and see if we can find some of that blue haze. There it is. Too much. It looks a little bit reddish, but it's really kind of a blue. Let me see if I can adjust that color balance. That's a little more like it. It's more magenta than anything else. All right, and again, this is the Pleiades. This is the emblem off the Subaru. It's Pleiades in Japanese is Subaru. If you have questions about any of the equipment or anything like that, I am watching the chat. So say hi. If you've got something to say it. Now, I think the next thing we'll do, this is a very famous one, but we'll go on to we're going to hit some of the famous highlights tonight because there's a lot of good stuff up in here, and it won't be around for too much longer. I think I want to go try to see the Horsehead Nebula, which is a real famous Hubble shot. We can take a pretty good image of it. It's a good clear night tonight, and even though it's a very, very dim object, if we take a couple of minutes shot, we should get something we can see there. This one is, well, just so you'll know, this has an IC number. There are different catalogs, Messier catalog, New General catalog, and there's a joke about the IC catalog. This is IC 434, and the joke is if it's got an IC number, that means you probably won't see it. It's a tough one, so let's see if we can get over there. And again, all we have to do, I'll go ahead and just type IC 434 up here. And it should pop right in this vicinity here, and it did. And so now that it's loaded up in a planetarium, I'll scoot you up here just a little bit. And I can zoom this out a little bit. There, you can see that. There's a whole lot. This is in Orion. If you know Orion up in the sky, it's got these 3 big stars and then these 3 little stars here. The middle one's actually not a star. We may look at that one in just a minute. But right now, we're over here at the Pleiades, which is the next door neighbor. And we're going to zoom over here to this nebula. There's several objects in this area, but we're looking for the Horsehead. We'll also see the Flame Nebula, but that's not our target for the night, so just don't even look there. There we go. It's happy now. And off to the races. Right there by that 3rd star in Orion. And as you'll see, it's finished the slew. It's doing an 8-second exposure, and we should see that exposure come up on the screen in just a second. And it's resolving it. It says it's 6 arc minutes off, so it's not really happy. You can actually see the Horsehead right there. This is only an 8-second exposure, so it's not going to be very clear. We'll fix that in a minute. And we'll also flip this thing upside down because I like to see the Horsehead up, right side up. All right, it's made an adjustment to the slew. It's doing another control exposure. And it's resolved that. Alrighty. It looks pretty good to me. It should. This is what we're looking for right here in the center. All right, so here we are. We've got the flaming tree or the flame nebula, and we have the horse head. Let's see if we can get a decent image of this thing. I'm going to go for 3 minutes. Now, if you were wanting to take pictures of this and keep it, you'd set the guiding up, and you'd probably take 200 or 300, maybe 500 pictures of this, somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 or 5 hours to get a decent Hubble-like image. I think, and I hope you'll be interested in the image we get with just a 3-minute exposure. But the way this is done typically is you'll take just a load of images and you'll use a stacking program. There are many of those. I like to use Cyril. I sometimes use Astap. It can also do stacking. Anyway, so when you stack the images, what you're doing is you're collecting. There's not enough light to really expose a DSLR or a camera sensor from just a very short exposure like you would take in the daytime. But if you take enough images, you'll collect enough photons so that if they're added together, you'll get a really nice image. The stacking process pretty much replaces the fact that we don't have enough light. There's a lot to that. Stacking takes some skill, and then once you have the stacked image, turning that into something that's really attractive takes some more skill. There's some processing after the fact that is generally necessary to make something that you're seeing through a telescope look really presentable. And what we're waiting for here is 94 more seconds of this. After this one, unless anybody's got any requests, let's see, we can pop over here and see what else is up. One of the nice things about a Linux desktop is you actually get more than one. I've got PhD running in this desk. I've got 4 desktops set up on this Pi. I have one for PhD, and you can do the same thing as Windows and minimize things if you want to in each desktop. So you can have a desktop times that many minimized programs, and it still doesn't bog down. Anyway, I've got 4. I've got PhD in this one. I have Skychart or Carte du Ciel in this one, and I have CCDCiel in this one. So what I was thinking of after this, Leo is coming up, and Leo has got just a buku of galaxies in it. There's one that probably won't be late enough to see tonight that is a real classic. It's called Markarian's Chain. And it's an image where you can just see a whole boatload of galaxies. It's almost every star you think you're looking at is really just a galaxy. And you can see it down here in the sky chart. It's really going to be too low until around 3 in the morning to take this image right here. But there's another series of 3 right in through here that is going to be high enough, I believe, and we may try to get that one next after we take this image of the Horsehead. Okay, there we go. Oh, perfect. Here we have the Horsehead Nebula, and it's actually looking like a horsehead now. I can zoom it in a little bit. And there's the flame again. Don't look there. We're not going after that one tonight. If you get a lot more exposure, you'll get a lot more red in this. This is actually... If this were by itself, you wouldn't see anything. It would be just a black cloud of dust. It does throw some infrared. There was a recent Hubble picture of it that had an infrared camera used, and it was showing that it did throw some infrared light, but basically this is a dust cloud, and if there weren't big, bright nebulas reflecting behind it, and these stars reflecting off this big red nebula back here, you wouldn't see it at all. And it's the fact that you can't see the nebula through it is what makes it show up, which I think is kind of cool. I don't have my color quite where I want. I got too much green. Oh, the other thing too is this is, of course, a jet trail. You can actually tell it's a jet trail because you can see there's strobes going here. You got kind of a green strobe and a red strobe. One of the reasons I like to take shorter exposure when I'm imaging is because I do get a lot of these in satellite trails and other things, and they're really not practical to take out. And if you're taking 10 or 15-minute exposures, you know, you can have a 10-minute exposure, 15-minute exposure ruined by just one good jet trail through it. If you had instead 15 one-minute exposures, the odds are maybe only one or two of those, and you'd still have the other 13 minutes of exposure available. I'm going to see if I can do something about that real quick. Anyway, there's our Horsehead Nebula. Why? Too much green. Okay, that's got some of the red coming back. Still too much green. Again, when you're taking these images, these are just preview shots. This is not what you would capture. If you were going to capture, there's another screen here for that. And you would tell it, okay, I want 60-second exposures, and I want these settings in the camera, and I'll take 30 of them, or I'll take 300 of them. And you just let the thing run. The guiding will keep it on track. As you can see, we're stuck on this star. This graph shows you the little variations to the mount that it had to correct. The mount itself has a computer and does track, but when you have guiding looking at an individual star and taking images every second and a half, you're gonna keep it pretty tight, and you can have some really long exposures with good good resolution and not no jitter or anything like that. Part of the magic. All right, let's go see if we can grab one of these guys. M96. M indicates, again, a Messier number. Messier, you know, if you've ever watched a Star Party, you've heard this rhetoric a million times, but I'll make it 1,000,001. Messier was a comet hunter. He got paid to find comets. And he had a lousy telescope. It was the 1700s. So he would look up in the sky and see a smudge, and you have to watch it for a couple of weeks before he decided it's not moving, so it can't be a comet. And so after a while, he started making a list of things that he knew were in a specific place in the sky. And in his list, there weren't comets. He didn't want to look at them. So basically, there were his throwaway list, and it's become one of the list of famous things to see in the sky for modern day observers. Okay, we're going to hop across the meridian again. We'll probably take a trip like this and end up back over here at M96. So, turning off the guiding this time. Goodbye. And again, you can set that up to do that automatically whenever you move. I just like doing things manually sometimes. All right, and back on the preview screen, new target. M96 got grabbed by the planetarium program. We say okay, and we'll go over there and watch it scoot. Off to the races. It's taking the circular route, going east to go west. There it goes. Now, as long as we don't have a tree in the way, we should get a 8-second exposure here that'll give us an idea what's going to go on. Ah, that would be a tree. We still might be okay. We'll give it another minute. If the first image was just a little bit low and it makes an adjustment, we should be fine. It says 11 arc minutes off. That's a pretty good distance. Now we're going to be in trouble. This looks like our target right here. All right, let's find something else. We can go back over to where we were and take a look. What's M67? One of the nice things about planetarium programs, they'll tell you what things are. We can go look at that for a second because that's higher. We may come back to this one. So we'll go there for a second. I'm not a huge fan of open clusters. I know we did the Pleiades earlier. New target, M67. To me, open clusters are a little bit boring, but the Pleiades is famous, and it does have the nebulosity from the dust that's in front of it that makes it a little more interesting. Okay, and so now we're on M67. We'll get that all lined up. We should see our image in a minute. All right, so this is an open cluster. At one point, there was probably a whole lot of gas, cloud, and material here that formed most of these stars, and now they're just kind of on their lonesome. They're not as interesting, I don't think, as... We'll take a longer exposure so we can get some of this noise out of here. They're not as interesting, I don't think, as globular clusters, or globular clusters, some people call them. Globular clusters are very, very old. These are not that old in the grand scope of the universe. The universe is, almost 14 billion years old. Some of the globular clusters are 12 billion years old. Some of these open clusters are a lot younger than that. They have younger stars, and they're not quite as dense. But they are interesting, and they do look like a blurb in the sky that are easy to spot. There are some of them that have names because they have a particular shape. There's one called the angelfish cluster because the actual cluster is kind of in the shape of an angelfish. There's another one that's called the wild duck cluster, and I guess it looks like a flying duck. There's also one that's the beehive. There's actually 2 or 3 beehive objects out there. They're mostly open clusters anyway. The big difference between an open cluster and a globular cluster is the open clusters you can, kind of see through it. Globular clusters are real, real tight. Some of them may even have black holes in the center. Yes, Skychart is cool. Could I zoom in on the horse head? Yeah, I could. We'd have to go back there again. We might just do that in a minute, since we're kind of killing time between. I think I'll go over to. I think I'll go over to Orion, and then maybe if you'd like, I'll zoom in on the horse head. We've got a display coming up on this. Now, see, when I get a little bit more time in the thing, I actually get something that looks more like an image. This is 2 minutes on a bright object, and so I get something that looks more like a star field and doesn't have all that noise in it. I am using a cooled camera. This camera's got a chip in it that cools it down to -15 centigrade. You can see over here where the cursor is that it is actually sitting at, well, -14.9 when you said that, but -15 is where it's pretty much hovering right now. All right, by request, then we'll go back over to Orion. We'll take a quick stop at Orion Nebula, and then because it's very bright, and then we'll take another stab at the horse head, and I'll zoom in as best I can on it without getting too much graininess. You really have to take a lot of image time to get it to the point where you can zoom in and not get image grain. All right, so Orion's sitting over here. We'll go right to M42, which is the big kahuna. This was the very first object I ever imaged with a webcam in a telescope, and it just about knocked me out of my chair. I had no idea that you could do this kind of stuff. And when I first saw that image come up, okay, we're going to stop you. When I first saw that image come up, and I boosted the gain and saw the color, I nearly fell out of my chair. I didn't think you could do anything like that with just a telescope and a simple camera, but apparently you can. Okay, so you know the drill. We've picked our target. We go back to CCDCiel. We say it's a new target. It already knows about it from the planetarium program. So we click OK, and we click OK, and we go over here and watch it off to races. Of course, it's got to go across this meridian again. So every time it does that, it's going to take the long way around to give it time to flip upside down. Because when the telescope's on one side, it's got to be on one side of the pier, and when it's on the other side, it's got to be flipped the other direction. You'll see I have 3 lines. Well, besides the direction lines, I have 3 major lines here. I have this big one here, which is the north-south line, which is the meridian, which is important because when you're imaging close to the meridian, you have to take care that when it crosses the meridian, it's going to do a flip, and you have to get that involved in your sequencing. This one here is called the galactic equator. You can see this gray area here is actually the Milky Way. And if you think of the Milky Way like a CD or a record, old school if you're a record, it's a disk. And this represents the outside ring of the disk. And it's so dense with objects because you're looking along the disk out to the equator of the disk. So this is called the galactic equator. And then this contraption here is called the ecliptic. And the ecliptic, oh, I'm wrong. This is the ecliptic here. The ecliptic is where, no, I was right. I hate it when I was wrong and I was right again. The ecliptic is where the planets go. You can see there's Uranus there, and when the moon's up, it'll be along this path. When the sun's up, it'll be along this path. When Mars and Jupiter and everything else is up, they'll be along this path. Unfortunately, they're not around today. Okay, so we're sitting at M42. By now, we're probably already plate solved, and wow. And that's just an 8-second image. So let's see if we can just boost this sucker. Let's do a 60-second image on this one. No, we'll just do 20 seconds. That's all we're going to need. In fact, we'll crank this down a little bit. I understand I'm entertaining some spider fans. Hello, spider fans. And you can see, whoa, it is a really big and bright. You can actually see this nebula. Let's see if I can find a middle ground here. I got too much red, haven't I? Too much blue, too. Come on. A little bit more. I want to see the running man. Okay. This one here, there's a dark nebula here that looks like a man running. You can kind of see his legs. And this is called the running man. Oh, look, another star trail. That's a jet. That's a high altitude jet right there. Heh. Let's see. It's not really a star trail. It's a jet trail. And yeah, this is Orion Nebula. This is a star-forming region in here, and it's making little stars and all these clouds of dust. And one day it'll run out of gas, and it'll just be a open cluster, which is pretty much the way the Running Man is kind of burning out. Let's see. And it actually has some blues and other things too. I just don't have the color balance right in the preview. I don't really worry too much about preview other than just making sure that I have the detail and the clarity. See if we can go another click. Yeah, I can bump that down a little bit. You can see how crispy clear that gas is. Now, if you look up in the sky, and you see Orion, and you see the 3 stars that are Orion's belt, which right now would be in Georgia, the southwest sky, at about halfway up the horizon to the roof. If you look at the 3 stars in his sword, that middle star is not a star. That middle star is actually this. And although there are a lot of stars here, what we're looking at when we see that, you'll notice that middle star is a little fuzzy. That's because this guy is a little fuzzy. I'm going to give this one more shot at trying to get the too much red. That's a little better. I'm starting to see a little blue in there. There should be some green too. All right, anyway, okay, this is Orion. Now, we said we were going to do the horse head again, so off we go. I see 434. It's still up there. That's convenient. Okay, now I see 434 is right there. And off we go. This should be a quick one because it's not far to go. And we got to get we got to get a fairly long exposure on this to get this to happen. Oh, we're close. There's the flaming tree. Okay, so what we're doing is over here. All right, so we're getting close. This looks, yeah, we're getting close. Okay, precision slew finished. That means it's happy with, and it's 0.01 of an arc minute away from being perfect. I can live with that. So let's go ahead and get this thing going again. So take an image, grab a star, turn on the guiding. We'll clear this old graph so it can make a new one. And that should do just fine. Yep. Alrighty. So we'll start a long preview on this one and see if we can't get something we can zoom in a little bigger. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, I like questions. I hope you like this channel. It's new. If there are suggestions for things I can do or do better, please let me know. The goal of this channel is to show people how to do these things. Now, you can use Windows software for this, and there are plenty of places that tell you how to do that. But for those of us who use Linux or Unix-based software, there's plenty of it out there that's every bit as good, sometimes even better. But there's not a lot of media out there talking about how to use it. So that's what I'm trying to be here for. This is a long exposure. I said to take 360 seconds. So we'll have to be patient for this one. What you're seeing here in this picture is I have the gain turned way up on the preview, and so I'm picking up noise in the camera, and it does let me see some of the nebulosity better and some of the things that I need to see to make sure that we're centered on the image. For example, if I have it this low, I can't tell. And the trouble is, as you turn a dark image up, you start seeing the noise coming from the sensor. When you're doing the processing, you can get rid of all of that very easily. There's a process, well, there's 3 types of calibration frames that you use. You use one that's called a dark frame, where you actually take the same exposure at the same temperature with a lens cap on, and it takes a dark so that anything that's a hot pixel, like some of these little red dots are hot pixels that are defects in the electronics, and subtracts the, well, if you take a dark and they call this image the light, and you subtract the dark from the light, you eliminate the noise that's caused by electronic problems and some other issues. Then there's a bias frame where you put the lens cap on again and take the exposure down to a very low level below anything you'd ever use, so that if there's any inherent noise when there's no signal, that gets subtracted out. And so once you subject a picture like this to those calibration frames, you really get a pretty clean image. And we still got 156 to go. There's a little counter down here, you can see. 150, 149. We're coming up to galaxy season. We've lost the 2 big famous ones, Triangulum and Andromeda. Andromeda is the closest galaxy to us, but it's really, you have to get it just about the instant it turns dark now, because it's already heading for the other side of the Earth at night. It's kind of signals the start of galaxy season, but there's some really cool and interesting galaxies coming up, and like Markarian's Chain. There's a Sombrero galaxy. There's a Whirlpool galaxy that's very cool. Pinwheel galaxy and a bunch of others. Bode's galaxy and the Cigar galaxy are up. We might take a look at them if we have time here in a little bit. I'm using a color camera. A lot of people, including Hubble, generally use monochrome cameras and use filters to filter out, or more or less to let in, certain colors of light. And then once they have, for example, red, green, blue, once they get those 3 colors, although that's not what they typically use, they'll combine those monochrome images into a color image. Color cameras more or less work the same way, but they split the pixels up on the plate in a single image. All right, we're home stretch now, 26 seconds. So once it grabs these images, by the way, are just about 40 megabytes. They're huge. And so it takes about 5 seconds once it's finished to download the image onto the drive and then display it for us. So here's our last 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. It's downloading, and the display should come up in just a moment. And boom, there we go. Okay, that's not half bad. Oh, look, and we got another jet trail. Dude, that's a pretty high altitude one, too. All right, still got too much green. Too much green. I can't get rid of that green. Boy, that's green. All right, so let's see if we can pick up one of those galaxies again. How are we doing? Gee, that should be high enough now. Let's try M96 again. See if our tree is going to allow us to get there. All right, new target. Here we are coming around. All right, that looks pretty good. Now, are we going to have my tree? No, no tree. Oh, good. We got galaxies. Yeah, that's 3 galaxies right there. There's another one there, and there's another one there. We'll get a bigger picture of them once we get things settled down. Now this is a wide field rig. That means that I can take big pictures of large areas of the sky, but it does reduce my ability to really zoom. I have another scope that's the opposite. It can take really great zoomed in pictures, but it can't take wide areas of the sky. All right, we got a planetarium's finished. Why are you so messed up here? Take a star, grab a star, and off to the races. That looks all right. And we'll take a 1-minute exposure on this one. This is the watching paint dry section of the star party. That doesn't look bad. Let's see if I can get a little boost to it. We don't have the moon tonight fighting with us, which is great. And we'll bump this up a little. I can't go much more than that. Not without getting a whole lot more time on the image. But as you can see, galaxy, 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 galaxy. They're just all over the place. And there's another one there. You can just barely see a little smudge of a galaxy. I think galaxies are cool. All right, that's not quite Markarian's chain, but as you can see, this section of the sky, if you look in this direction, you just see galaxy after galaxy after galaxy. And if we crank it down, you'll see that yeah, you can see a little more of their real color when we stop blasting the image. But all right, let's see what next. I've got time for maybe one more. Ah, here we go. We'll end on, I like to end on the moon, but we don't have a moon tonight to end on, so we'll have to do something else. Let's go to Cigar Galaxy and Bode's Galaxy. They're always kind of cool. it the easy way. There we go. And there they are. Now there's a little trick when I'm imaging this pair that I like to use. Let me get that 60-second thing. What I'll do is I'll grab this star right here and tell it to slew to that star. And when I do that, it'll put that in the center, which will put those two in the center, which works out pretty well. All right, we'll take a 1-minute exposure of this one. And we'll call it a night. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate all your time. If you would like and subscribe, that would be exciting. I'll try to find, that's the interesting thing about this. If we do this every so often, the night sky changes over the course of the year. And in fact, over the course of years, different things occur. You can, right now we're in a period where when Mars and Jupiter were in the vicinity, they were pretty far away, but their orbit is an ellipse, and so sometimes they're a lot closer. And when you can find Jupiter when it's very close, it makes a spectacular target. Also, this is the wide field rig, but I will be dragging out the other rig, especially when we get some targets that are very small, like the Crab Nebula, or some of those things that require a little more magnification. Bode's M81 and Cigar's M82, which are the Messier numbers. They also have NGC numbers. All right, we're going to zoom this one in, and then we'll call it quits for the night. Put things in the bag, and again, thank you all for coming. I hope you'll come again. Nine seconds. This one you're looking at like looking down at a record, and this one you're looking at the edge of the record. They actually, this one actually has, if we had a different kind of filter on it that would show it, it has a red plume coming out through these holes on both sides. But it really is pretty spectacular. I've seen other images. You may want to Google this one. This is M82, or the Cigar Galaxy. Wonder why they call it that. Oh, the previous Galaxy pair that I was doing, that was M95, M96, but there are a whole slew of in the 90s galaxies in that area. They're all, most of them are Messier catalog. Some of them are not, especially the ones that are further out. So anyway, I still have just too much red. Too much red. A little bit too much blue. Yeah, still too much red. Oh well. Thank you for coming, and I hope to see you again.